Raymond Cole was 41 years old, and until that Thursday afternoon, he believed sacrifice was the purest form of love. He was a master electrician who had built his contracting business from a single van and a tool belt. For 14 months straight, he had worked 16-hour days, skipping meals, missing family, running himself to the bone, to eliminate $247,000 in debt his wife had brought into their marriage. He never complained. He never wavered. He believed they were climbing out together. That afternoon, Raymond came home early for the first time in months. His wife, Cassandra, was on the back porch, on the phone, laughing. He stopped before announcing himself. Then he heard his name. What she said next, casually, without a trace of guilt, would dismantle everything he thought his marriage was. Cassandra had no idea he was standing there. And she had absolutely no idea what was coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The red numbers on the dashboard read 5:47 a.m. as Raymond Cole sat in his work truck, parked in his own driveway. The engine ticked as it cooled, and the spring morning air held just enough chill to make him grateful for the coffee in his cup holder. He unwrapped a gas station sandwich, the cellophane crinkling in the quiet dawn. This had become his breakfast spot, his own driveway, watching the sky lighten behind his two-story colonial. The house was dark except for the porch light he'd installed himself 3 years ago. Inside, Cassandra slept. These days, their schedules barely overlapped. Raymond took a bite of the sandwich, barely tasting it. At 41, he had the calloused hands and steady presence of a man who'd built something real from nothing. Cole Electrical Contracting had started with just him, one van, and a tool belt. Now he ran 2 full crews, though these past 14 months he'd basically been running himself as a third. His grandmother's voice echoed in his head. "Your word and your work are the same thing, boy." She'd raised him after his parents split, teaching him that a man's integrity wasn't something you talked about. It was something you proved day after day, in the quiet hours when nobody was watching. The commercial crew would start at 7. They had a major rewiring job at an office complex downtown. Good money, steady work. After supervising them all day, he'd run residential calls himself from 5 until 9, sometimes later. The schedule was brutal, but the math was simple. More hours meant more payments against Cassandra's debt. He remembered the day she'd shown him the full picture 9 years ago. Medical bills from her mother's final illness, credit cards that had spiraled, a car loan gone sideways, and worst of all, a personal loan from a private lender whose contract had teeth. All told, $247,000. Raymond hadn't hesitated. He'd restructured his business finances, taken out a second line of credit, and promised they'd climb out together. That word, together, had meant everything to him. Now, 14 months into the accelerated payment schedule, they were down to the final $31,000. The finish line was finally in sight. Just a few more weeks of double shifts, of gas station meals, of passing his sleeping wife like ships in the night. He finished the sandwich and gathered the wrapper, tucking it into the small garbage bag he kept in the truck. The sky was beginning to show traces of pink at the edges. Inside, the house was immaculate. Cassandra kept it that way. He had to give her that. The hardwood floors gleamed, and everything sat in its proper place. Raymond moved quietly up the stairs to their bedroom. Cassandra's breathing was deep and even. Her dark hair spread across the pillow. He gathered his fresh clothes and headed to the shower, letting the hot water ease some of the tension from his shoulders. These morning routines had become automatic. Shower, dress, check his phone for any early messages from the crew. He could do it all without turning on a single light, moving through his own house like a shadow. His tool belt waited by the door, the leather worn smooth from years of use. Each tool had its place, each piece positioned for maximum efficiency. Raymond had always believed in systems, in doing things right the first time, in building foundations that would hold. The first crew would be arriving at the supply yard soon. Rodriguez would be handling materials distribution. Chen would be running point on the panel installation. Good men, reliable. Raymond had hired them himself, recognizing in them the same quiet competence he valued. He picked up his thermos, filled it with fresh coffee. The kitchen counter still held traces of yesterday's dinner. A plate in the drying rack, a glass half full of water. Small signs of the life he and Cassandra theoretically shared, even though their waking hours barely touched anymore. The sky was properly pink now, the neighbors' trees silhouetted against the dawn. Raymond started his truck, the familiar rumble of the engine matching the steady rhythm of his thoughts. Just a few more weeks. The debt that had shaped the last 9 years of their marriage was almost gone. Soon they could start fresh. Soon he could come home for dinner again, sit at his own table, sleep normal hours. He backed out of the driveway, muscle memory guiding the wheel. The porch light still glowed behind him, a single point of warmth in the gathering day. Raymond headed toward the supply yard, toward his crew, toward another 16-hour shift in the life he'd built 1 hour, one job, one payment at a time. The porch light clicked on automatically as Raymond pulled into the driveway at 9:45 p.m. His shoulders ached from a day of reaching overhead to install industrial lighting fixtures. The commercial job was going well, but running 2 crews was taking its toll. He gathered his thermos and tool belt, noting the BMW parked in their usual guest spot, Wendell's car. He'd grown used to seeing it there. Inside, the house smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Cassandra stood in front of their hall mirror, applying a final touch of lipstick. She wore a black dress he didn't recognize, fitted perfectly to her frame. Her hair fell in careful waves around her shoulders. "Hey, baby." She turned, offering him a quick kiss on the cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "There's leftover pot roast in the fridge. I'm heading out with Felicia and Wendell. Just dinner at that new place downtown." Raymond nodded, setting his tool belt in its designated spot by the door. These dinner outings had become routine over the past few months. Felicia and Wendell were Cassandra's closest friends, had been since before the marriage. He'd never questioned it. "Have fun," he said, his voice gruff from fatigue. "Don't stay out too late." Cassandra gathered her purse, another new addition he didn't remember discussing. "Don't wait up. You look exhausted." She touched his arm briefly. "You work too hard." The door clicked shut behind her, and Raymond stood in the sudden quiet of their home. The pot roast waited in the fridge as promised, alongside containers of vegetables and potatoes. He assembled a plate mechanically, noting the new throw pillows arranged on their living room sofa, deep burgundy with gold threading. They matched the room perfectly, but he couldn't remember approving that purchase. As his food heated in the microwave, he noticed a furniture delivery receipt on the counter. $400 for what appeared to be an accent chair. His forehead creased slightly. They'd agreed to hold off on non-essential purchases until the debt was cleared. The microwave beeped, and Raymond carried his plate to the kitchen island. He ate standing up, a habit formed from years of job sites. The house felt different lately. Or maybe Cassandra did. She moved through their spaces with an ease that seemed at odds with their financial situation. Her smile came quicker, her laughter lighter. Even her phone calls with Felicia had taken on a giggly quality he hadn't heard in years. He should be pleased, he thought. The lightness in her step probably meant she trusted his progress with the debt. She'd stopped asking about the numbers months ago, seemingly content to let him handle it. That was good, right? A sign of faith in his capability to manage their financial recovery. After eating, Raymond washed his plate and opened his laptop on the counter. The debt tracking spreadsheet was a complex document he'd maintained meticulously for 9 years. Every payment, every interest calculation, every adjustment carefully recorded. The remaining balance, $31,000, stared back at him in clean black digits. The number represented freedom within reach. Just a few more weeks of double shifts, a few more months of careful spending, and they'd be clear. He could already imagine scaling back to normal hours, maybe taking a Sunday off now and then. Upstairs, Raymond changed for bed, his work clothes carrying the smell of electrical tape and copper wire. The master bathroom counter held new products he didn't recognize. Expensive creams in elegant jars, facial serums that probably cost more than his weekly gas station meals. But questioning Cassandra's beauty routine had never ended well. Besides, looking good was important to her social circle, and those connections often led to valuable contracts for his business. He lay in bed, listening to the quiet house settling. The bedroom window was cracked open, letting in the spring night air. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed, followed by familiar laughter, Cassandra's musical tone mixing with Felicia's deeper chuckle. The BMW's engine purred to life. Raymond's eyes grew heavy. The spreadsheet still glowed on the kitchen counter downstairs, its neat columns of numbers promising order and progress. Everything was on track. Everything was accounted for. The debt would be gone soon, and they could start fresh. He drifted off to sleep, his calloused hands relaxed against the sheets, unaware that the carefully maintained spreadsheet, like so much else in his life, had been built on carefully constructed fiction. The inspection cancellation came through at 2:17 p.m. Raymond sat in his work truck, reading the text message twice to confirm. The city inspector had a family emergency. They'd need to reschedule for next week. He checked his schedule. His evening residential calls didn't start until 5:00 p.m. For the first time in months, he had unexpected free hours. The spring afternoon was mild, sunlight warming the truck's interior. Raymond's shoulders felt lighter than usual, unburdened by the weight of junction boxes and heavy cable runs. He turned onto his street, noting how different the neighborhood looked in full daylight. Kids' bikes lay scattered on lawns. A neighbor watered her flowers. This was a world he rarely saw anymore. As he pulled into his driveway, Cassandra's voice carried from the back porch, clear, animated, punctuated by laughter. She was on the phone, probably with Felicia. Raymond reached for his lunch bag, planning to announce himself, when something in her tone made him pause. "I'm telling you, it's perfect." Cassandra's words floated through the afternoon air. Raymond doesn't know anything. He just works. That's all he's good for. Raymond's hand stilled on the door handle, his breath caught in his throat. "No. Listen." More laughter. "I told Wendell, the man has been running himself into the ground for over a year, and he thinks it's for us. It's for me, baby. All for me." The words landed like physical blows. Raymond sat motionless, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Through the windshield, he could see the edge of their back porch, the hanging plants he'd installed last summer swaying gently in the breeze. A pause, then Cassandra's voice again. "Felicia asked me if I felt bad. I said, 'Feel bad about what?' The man wants to be my slave. Let him be my slave. That's what he signed up for." More laughter, lighter this time, as if she'd just shared a particularly clever joke. Raymond opened his door silently, his movements mechanical. The lunch bag in his hand, another gas station sandwich he'd never gotten around to eating, felt suddenly heavy. He walked to the porch rail and set it down, careful not to make a sound. Behind him, Cassandra's conversation continued, but the words had become background noise, like static on a radio. He returned to his truck, closed the door with deliberate gentleness, and sat. The garage door before him, the one he'd installed himself 3 years ago, filled his vision. He remembered the installation clearly. A Saturday morning project. Cassandra bringing him lemonade, commenting on how handy he was, how lucky she felt. He wondered now if she'd been laughing then, too. The past 14 months unspooled in his mind like wire from a spool. Every pre-dawn start, every skipped family gathering, every dinner eaten standing up in some dark parking lot, the cousin's wedding he'd missed for an emergency panel installation, the Sunday dinners at Uncle Darnell's he'd stopped attending because the schedule was too tight, the persistent ache in his lower back, the cracking of his hands in winter, the bone-deep exhaustion he'd worn like a second skin. He'd carried it all without complaint, believing it was temporary, believing it was shared, believing that every sacrifice brought them closer to the future they'd planned together. Now each memory shifted, realigned itself under this new light. It wasn't sacrifice she'd seen. It was submission. It wasn't partnership. It was exploitation. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. Your word and your work are the same thing. He'd lived by that. Every promise kept, every job completed, every dollar earned and allocated exactly as agreed. He'd given his word, and he'd kept it. But Cassandra had seen something else entirely. She'd seen a man she could use, and she'd done exactly that. Raymond started the truck. The engine's familiar rumble grounded him, connected him to something real. He backed out of the driveway slowly, deliberately, as Cassandra's laughter continued to drift from the back porch. His hands were steady on the wheel. His breathing was even. He would not confront her. Not now. Not like this. Rage was a luxury he couldn't afford. It would give her too much power, too much satisfaction. No, this required something else, something measured, calculated, precise. The same attention to detail he brought to every electrical system he'd ever designed. Raymond pulled onto the main road, his mind already sorting through connections, identifying points of failure, planning the necessary repairs. He wasn't going to react. He was going to respond. And when he did, it would be with the same methodical excellence that had built his business, his reputation, his life. But first, he needed to think. Raymond drove through the darkening evening, muscle memory guiding him down familiar streets, until he reached Uncle Darnell's modest single-story home. The porch light was on, as it always was after sunset, a habit from Darnell's postal carrier days, when he'd return home late during winter routes. He parked next to Darnell's old Buick and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The house looked exactly as it had for the past 20 years. Neat lawn, carefully maintained flower beds, American flag by the door. Some things, at least, remained steady. Uncle Darnell opened the door before Raymond reached the porch. He stood in the doorway, reading glasses perched on his nose, taking in Raymond's expression with the quiet observation that came from decades of watching people navigate hard moments. "You eaten?" Darnell asked simply. Raymond shook his head. "Got soup on the stove. Come on in." The kitchen was warm and smelled of vegetable beef soup, another constant in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath Raymond's feet. He sat at the worn formica table while Darnell ladled soup into 2 bowls, added saltine crackers on the side, and set them down without ceremony. They ate in comfortable silence. Darnell didn't push, didn't pry. He simply existed in the same space, providing the steady presence that had anchored Raymond since his teenage years. The soup was good. Real food, not gas station fare, and Raymond realized he couldn't remember his last proper meal. Finally, Raymond spoke. "Something's wrong, Uncle D." Darnell set his spoon down and waited. I'm not ready to say exactly what. Need to look at some things first. Make sure I understand what I'm seeing." Raymond's voice was level, controlled. "But it's not what I thought it was. None of it." Darnell studied him for a long moment, his eyes sharp behind his reading glasses. Then he nodded once and said simply, "Then look." Those 2 words carried the weight of permission, of validation. They acknowledged Raymond's need for certainty without demanding immediate explanation. They trusted his judgment while confirming his instincts. Raymond finished his soup, helped wash the dishes, and drove home. The house was dark when he arrived, Cassandra already in bed. He showered quietly, slipped under the covers beside her sleeping form, and stared at the ceiling. His mind worked methodically through the past 14 months, like tracing a complex circuit diagram. The new furniture that appeared without discussion, the regular lunches with Felicia and Wendell that seemed to multiply as his work hours increased. The way Cassandra stopped asking about the debt payoff timeline, stopped showing any concern about their financial situation at all. Wendell's constant presence took on new significance. The casual friendship Raymond had accepted at face value now felt hollow, constructed. He remembered Wendell's easy smile, his frequent offers to keep Cass company while Raymond worked. The consideration that had seemed neighborly now felt calculated. Dawn crept in through the bedroom windows. Raymond hadn't slept, but his mind was clear. He rose quietly, dressed for work, and made his first call of the day from his truck. Priya Okafor answered on the second ring. "Raymond? You're calling early. I need a favor, Priya." "A big one. Go ahead." "I need a complete audit. Every account you have access to, business and personal. Going back 18 months. A pause. Then, "That's extensive. May I ask why?" "Not yet, but I trust you, and I need to know exactly what the numbers say." Priya, who had handled his books for 6 years and knew his attention to detail matched her own, didn't hesitate. "I'll have preliminary findings in 48 hours. Full report might take another day." "Thank you." Raymond hung up and started his truck. He ran his crews as usual, handled client meetings, signed off on materials orders. Everything normal. Everything steady. When he returned home that evening, Cassandra was cooking dinner, something that hadn't happened in weeks. "You're home early," she said, smiling. She crossed the kitchen and kissed his cheek. "I love you. Love you too," Raymond replied, the words tasting different now, hollow. Later, after she'd gone to bed, Raymond sat at his laptop and opened the debt-tracking spreadsheet he'd looked at hundreds of times before. But now, instead of accepting the numbers as given, he began to question each entry, each payment, each remaining balance. The $31,000 figure that had seemed so close to freedom suddenly felt like a fiction, a carefully constructed illusion. He started a new spreadsheet, blank and waiting for truth. Raymond pulled into Priya's office complex at exactly 9 a.m. Her accounting firm occupied a modest suite in a professional building. Nothing flashy, just like Priya herself. The parking lot was half empty, typical for a Saturday morning. He appreciated her coming in on her day off. Inside, Priya sat behind her desk, a thick manila folder centered perfectly on the polished surface. Her office was meticulously organized, with clean lines and minimal decoration, save for a single photo of her family and her framed CPA license. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming in person," she said, her Nigerian accent more pronounced than usual, a sign Raymond knew that she was troubled by what she'd found. "That bad?" Raymond asked, settling into the chair. Priya opened the folder and pulled out a series of documents, arranging them in a precise line. "I need you to understand something before we start. What I found isn't just concerning, it's deliberate. This wasn't carelessness or poor record-keeping." She pointed to the first document. "A bank statement from 8 months ago. The debt you believed you were still paying. It was cleared here." She tapped the paper with a perfectly manicured nail. "The final payment processed on February 12th. Raymond stared at the date, his mind automatically calculating how many 16-hour days he'd worked since then, how many meals eaten in his truck, how many family events missed. "But the spreadsheet," he started, "was manipulated," Priya interrupted gently. She pulled out another document. "Cassandra had full access to the joint account you set up for debt payments. Starting in March, she began redirecting funds, approximately $29,000 total, through what appeared to be continued debt payments. But they were going to this. She slid forward a bank statement showing a closed account in Felicia's name. Raymond's hands remained perfectly still on his knees. My sister-in-law. Yes, and from there, Priya laid out a series of Venmo transactions, utility bills, and account transfers. The money moved to this account. She placed the final document in front of him, a joint checking account in the names of Cassandra Cole and Wendell Tate. The air in the office felt suddenly thin. Raymond studied the account details with the same careful attention he'd give a complex wiring diagram. The dates, the amounts, the pattern of deposits matching exactly with his increased work schedule. I found the utility account first, Priya continued, her voice professional but gentle. An apartment on Monroe Street. Both their names on the power bill going back 11 months. That led me to the joint account, and from there, she gestured at the paper trail. Everything else became clear. Raymond nodded slowly. Total amount? Conservatively, $34,000 diverted through various channels. There could be more I can't see. She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes serious. Raymond, I need to be very clear about something. This isn't just deception. This is financial fraud. The systematic redirection of funds, the fabricated debt statements, the use of closed accounts to obscure money movement, these are criminal actions. Raymond absorbed this in silence. The neat row of documents before him told a story of calculated extraction. Each transaction, each false statement, each redirected payment represented a moment when Cassandra had looked at his sacrifice and seen only opportunity. What do you want me to do? Priya asked after a long moment. Nothing, Raymond said quietly. Don't do anything. Don't tell anyone. He began gathering the documents, sliding them back into the folder with careful precision. I need to think. Raymond. Thank you, Priya. He stood, folder in hand. I mean that. Thank you for being thorough, for being honest. He walked to his truck in the half-empty parking lot and sat behind the wheel. The folder rested on the passenger seat like a live thing. 20 minutes passed while he stared through the windshield, his mind working through implications, connections, consequences. Finally, he started the engine. He drove to the Henderson job site, a 3-story office building renovation they'd been rewiring for the past month. The site was deserted on Saturday, but he had keys and permits. He parked, got his tools from the back, and walked inside. For the next 8 hours, Raymond worked. He ran conduit, pulled wire, checked connections, each task precise, each movement efficient. He worked until the sun disappeared behind the buildings and his hands ached from gripping tools. He worked until the physical exhaustion matched the emotional weight. He worked until dark. Raymond chose Marcello's for lunch, an Italian place nice enough to put Felicia at ease, but not so upscale it would make her suspicious. He arrived 15 minutes early and requested a quiet booth near the back. The hostess led him to a corner table partially screened by a decorative wall of wine bottles. He watched Felicia walk in at 12:03, her designer purse a stark contrast to her discount store outfit. That was Felicia, always reaching for a lifestyle just beyond her means, just like her sister. She spotted him and waved, her smile genuine. Raymond stood as she approached. Thanks for meeting me, he said, pulling out her chair. I really need a woman's perspective on this anniversary thing. Of course, Felicia settled in, immediately reaching for the menu. 9 years is a big one. Though honestly, Ray, Cass is pretty easy to shop for. Anything expensive usually works. Raymond laughed softly, the sound practiced and easy. That's why I need help. I'm not great at picking out the right kind of expensive. The waiter arrived with water and took their drink orders. Iced tea for Raymond, a glass of Pinot Grigio for Felicia. Raymond watched her scan the menu prices before ordering the chicken marsala, noting how her eyes lingered on the more expensive dishes before settling on something mid-range. How have you been? He asked once the waiter left. I feel like we hardly see you these days. Oh, you know how it is. Felicia waved vaguely. Work's been crazy. Plus, I'm trying to get my finances sorted out. Thinking about maybe buying a condo next year. Raymond nodded encouragingly. That's great. Cass mentioned she's been helping you with some money management stuff. A flicker crossed Felicia's face, so brief most people would miss it. But Raymond was looking for it. Yeah, she's been amazing. Really helped me get organized. Their drinks arrived. Raymond took a slow sip of tea. That's good. Family should help family. He paused deliberately. Speaking of finances, I actually wanted to run something by you. Been going through some business accounts lately, trying to clean everything up before the end of the year. Found some numbers that don't quite make sense. Felicia's hand tightened slightly on her wine glass. Oh? Raymond kept his tone casual. Just some transfers I can't quite place. Thought maybe Cass had mentioned setting up a secondary account or something? The color drained from Felicia's face so quickly it was almost impressive. She took a large swallow of wine. I'm not really sure about any of that, she stammered. Cass handles all her own banking. Raymond simply watched her, his expression mild. Said nothing. Let the silence do its work. Felicia lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Look, she burst out, voice low and rushed. I thought it was just about protecting assets. Cass said it was smart financial planning, that your business could have liability issues. When did it start? Raymond asked quietly. Felicia stared at her wine glass. The account setup? March, I think. No, Raymond interrupted gently. Wendell, when did that start? A long pause. Felicia seemed to deflate. Before, she whispered. Before the debt thing. Before she came to you about helping her. Raymond absorbed this, the final piece clicking into place, with a sound only he could hear. She already knew then, he said. When she asked me to take on her debt, she was already planning. Ray, I'm so sorry. Felicia's eyes were wet. She said it wasn't really wrong because you were both getting what you wanted. You got to be the hero. Fix everything like you always want to, and she got financial security, Raymond finished. He smiled slightly. It didn't reach his eyes. And Wendell. The waiter arrived with their entrees. Raymond thanked him politely. Neither of them touched their food. Are you... Felicia hesitated. What are you going to do? Eat lunch, Raymond said simply. The chicken marsala here is excellent. He picked up his fork. Try yours. And don't worry, this conversation stays between us. Felicia managed a few small bites, clearly relieved by his calm demeanor. When the check came, Raymond paid without hesitation. He walked her to her car, thanked her for her time, and promised to let her know what he decided about the anniversary gift. He waited until her car disappeared around the corner before walking to his truck. He had a 2:00 p.m. appointment with Caroline Martinez, the attorney Priya had recommended. The folder of financial documents was already in his briefcase. Caroline Martinez's office occupied the corner suite of a modest professional building. The conference room where she met Raymond had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city's business district. Raymond placed Priya's folder on the polished table between them. Tell me everything, Caroline said, opening a legal pad. Start from the beginning. For the next hour, Raymond laid out the story methodically. The original debt, his commitment to paying it, the discovery of Cassandra's deception, and finally, the documented evidence of financial misconduct. Caroline took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting Raymond speak. When he finished, she opened the folder and began reviewing Priya's findings. Her expression remained neutral, but her pen moved faster across the page. This is textbook financial fraud, she said finally, looking up. The deliberate misdirection of funds, the fabricated statements, the hidden joint account with Mr. Tate. It's all documented here. The fact that the redirected money came from your business income strengthens our position considerably. What exactly does that mean in practical terms? Raymond asked. Caroline laid out 3 documents side by side. It means we can file for divorce citing financial misconduct, which significantly impacts asset division. The house is mortgaged in your name, maintained by your income. That stays with you. The redirected funds, conservatively estimated at $34,000, will be factored into the settlement calculation. Given that this money came from your business earnings and was fraudulently misappropriated, we'll argue for reduction of her share of marital assets accordingly. Raymond nodded. And the timing? We can file immediately. I suggest serving her Saturday morning. That gives us time to properly document the unwinding of joint accounts first. Speaking of which, she pulled out a checklist. Let's go through each account systematically. Everything needs to be done legally and documented thoroughly. For the next 2 hours, they mapped out every financial connection between Raymond and Cassandra. Caroline guided him through the proper procedures for separating accounts, transferring assets, and maintaining detailed records of every transaction. By the end, Raymond had a clear action plan for the next 3 days. One more thing, Raymond said as they finished. I need to make a phone call before this happens. That evening, Raymond sat in his truck outside Eleanor Whitfield's house. He'd called ahead, asked if he could stop by to discuss something important. Eleanor answered her door wearing reading glasses and a concerned expression. Raymond? Is everything all right? May I come in, Miss Eleanor? In her living room, surrounded by family photos spanning decades, Raymond chose his words carefully. He didn't tell her everything, not about Wendell, not about the full scope of the fraud, but he told her enough that he'd discovered serious financial deception, that Cassandra had been misleading him about the debt repayment, that things weren't what they appeared. I'm having dinner Saturday night, he said finally. I'd like you to be there. There are some things that need to be said, and I believe you should hear them directly. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. She'd always liked Raymond, always been quietly impressed by his work ethic and integrity. She'd also harbored private concerns about her daughter's character that she'd never voiced aloud. What time? She asked simply. The next morning, Raymond called the restaurant and made the reservation for 7 people. He contacted their longtime friends, the Harrises and the Thompsons, couples who'd known them throughout the marriage. Like Eleanor, he told them only that he had something important to share. That evening, he told Cassandra about the dinner plans. I thought we could celebrate, he said, smiling easily. We're almost done with the debt. Seems worth marking the occasion. Cassandra's face lit up. That's perfect. I'll wear my new dress. She kissed his cheek, already planning the social occasion in her mind. Raymond watched her walk away, thinking about the manila envelope sitting in Caroline Martinez's office, already prepared for Saturday morning delivery. The divorce papers were comprehensive, detailed, and absolutely clear about the financial misconduct claims. They would arrive at the house around 10 a.m., giving Cassandra several hours to absorb their contents before dinner. In the kitchen, Cassandra was already on the phone with Felicia, discussing what to wear. Raymond began quietly preparing his lunch for the next day, each movement precise and purposeful, like a man who knew exactly what he was building. The doorbell rang at 10:17 a.m. Cassandra, still in her silk robe, opened the door to find a courier holding a manila envelope. Cassandra Cole? The courier asked, consulting his clipboard. Yes? Please sign here. She scrawled her signature and took the envelope, already turning back inside. The door clicked shut behind her. Raymond, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee, heard the sound of tearing paper, followed by complete silence. 3 heartbeats passed. What is this? Cassandra's voice was dangerously quiet. Raymond took another sip of coffee. Legal documentation. Financial misconduct? Her voice rose sharply. Hidden accounts? What are you talking about? Let's discuss it at dinner, Raymond said calmly, standing to rinse his cup. At dinner? You served me divorce papers and want to wait until dinner? Cassandra's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. This is insane. You're making accusations. Not accusations, Raymond corrected quietly. Documentation. Everything in that folder is factual and verified. We'll talk about it tonight. Raymond! Tonight, he repeated, picking up his keys. 7 o'clock. Wear that new dress you mentioned. He left her standing in the kitchen, legal papers scattered across the counter like fallen leaves. That evening, the Capitol Grille's private dining room glowed with warm lighting. Raymond arrived early to greet each guest personally. Eleanor came first, elegant in navy blue, her face composed but watchful. The Harrises and Thompsons arrived together, making small talk about traffic. Felicia slipped in last, avoiding eye contact. Cassandra arrived exactly on time, wearing the new dress as instructed. Her makeup was flawless, her smile fixed in place. If their friends noticed any tension, they didn't show it. Raymond played the perfect host throughout dinner. He asked David Harris about his son's college applications. He complimented Sarah Thompson's recent promotion. He made sure everyone's wine glass stayed full. The main course, prime ribeye and roasted vegetables, was served without incident. As the plates were cleared, Raymond stood. The room quieted naturally. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady. "I wanted to share some news with the people who matter most to us." He paused, looking around the table. "First, I'm happy to announce that Cassandra's debt has been paid off completely." He smiled. "In fact, it was cleared 8 months ago, which I only recently discovered." Confusion flickered across several faces. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. Raymond reached for his briefcase and removed 2 folders. "I have here," he continued, "a complete audit conducted by my accountant, Priya Okafor, documenting how $34,000 of my business income was redirected through various accounts over the past 8 months. He placed the first folder on the table. "And this," he added, setting down the second folder, "is my attorney's summary of findings regarding those transactions." The silence in the room became dense, heavy. For those wondering about specifics, the money went through an account controlled by Felicia. He glanced at Cassandra's sister, who seemed to shrink in her chair, and ultimately into a joint account shared by my wife and Wendell Tate. Sarah Thompson's fork clattered against her plate. Raymond turned to face Cassandra directly. "I also want to acknowledge that I heard what you called me in our home, in the house I paid for, when you thought I wasn't listening. What was it?" "Ah, yes, your slave." Cassandra's face went white, then red. "You're twisting things completely out of context." "The context," Raymond cut in smoothly, "is documented in those folders. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie." He looked around the table once more. "I built everything I have through my own hands and my own word. I will not be anyone's resource." Finally, he turned to Eleanor. "Miss Eleanor, I apologize that you had to learn about this here, but I thought you deserved to know exactly who was living in that house." "You bastard!" Cassandra shot to her feet. "You manipulative, controlling—" "The debt was paid," Raymond continued calmly, speaking to the room rather than her. "The money was redirected. The documentation is clear." "He's lying!" Cassandra spun to face Felicia. "Tell them he's lying." Felicia stared fixedly at her untouched dessert. "This is ridiculous!" Cassandra's voice rose higher. "I was protecting our future. I was—" Raymond sat down, picked up his fork, and took a bite of chocolate cake. Around the table, no one moved. No one spoke. They watched as Cassandra's carefully constructed world collapsed in real time. "Someone say something," she demanded. "Mother?" Eleanor's face might have been carved from stone. Raymond finished his dessert methodically, set down his fork, and stood. "Thank you all for coming," he said quietly. "Good night." He walked out of the private dining room, leaving Cassandra mid-sentence, her protests echoing behind him like static from a dying radio. Sunday morning arrived with unusual clarity. Raymond sat at his kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed a quiet breakfast without exhaustion pressing down on his shoulders. The house felt different, lighter somehow, with Cassandra gone to stay with whatever friend would still take her calls. His phone buzzed. A text from his attorney. Documents filed first thing tomorrow. Stay the course. Raymond set the phone face down and took another sip of coffee. Through the window, he could see his neighbor Tom working in his yard. Just like every Sunday, the ordinary rhythm of life continued, undisturbed by the earthquake that had shaken Raymond's world. The following weeks unfolded with the precise efficiency of a well-planned electrical installation. His attorney moved quickly, presenting irrefutable documentation of the financial misconduct. The numbers told their own story. $34,000 of Raymond's business income, deliberately redirected through elaborate channels, all traceable back to Cassandra and Wendell's shared account. This isn't just about asset division, his attorney explained during their third meeting. This is about systematic financial fraud using your sole income. The judge will take that into consideration. She was right. The court reduced Cassandra's share of their joint assets proportionally to reflect the misappropriated funds. The house, mortgaged in Raymond's name, maintained by Raymond's work, stayed with him. Each ruling came down like another brick being removed from the wall Cassandra had built around herself. Felicia proved to be the keystone. Faced with potential legal exposure for her role in the account manipulation, she chose self-preservation. She provided detailed testimony about the scheme's mechanics, how Cassandra had planned it, how the money moved, how long it had been going on. Each statement she made drove another nail into her sister's desperate attempts at denial. "I didn't want to," Felicia told Raymond's attorney, her voice thin with anxiety. But Cass said it was just protecting the money. She said Raymond would never even notice. The ripples spread wider. Priya's thorough investigation had uncovered property records that led to an unexpected discovery. Wendell Tate had a wife. Within days of the dinner, a detailed package of documentation arrived at Mrs. Tate's office through official channels. 2 weeks later, she filed her own divorce proceedings. The social demolition was equally thorough. Eleanor, who had raised her daughters to value appearance above all else, found herself unable to maintain appearances in the face of such naked manipulation. She stopped returning Cassandra's increasingly desperate calls 3 days after the dinner. "I can't pretend anymore," she told Raymond when he called to check on her. "I taught her better than this." The Harrises and Thompsons, along with most of their mutual friends, quietly realigned themselves. They had always found Raymond's steady reliability more appealing than Cassandra's carefully curated charm. Now, faced with undeniable evidence of her true character, they made their choices clear through unanswered invitations and declined calls. Cassandra, who hadn't maintained full-time employment since the early years of their marriage, found herself facing a stark new reality. The reduced assets settlement barely covered her mounting legal fees. Her social circle, once so carefully cultivated, had reorganized itself around her absence. Even her old position at the real estate office, left temporarily 6 years ago, had long since been filled. Raymond watched it all from a distance, maintaining his routine. He ran his crews, met with clients, and slowly began remembering what it felt like to work normal hours. The bone-deep exhaustion of the past 14 months gradually lifted, replaced by a quiet certainty that he had done what needed to be done. 43 days after the dinner, Raymond sat in his attorney's office, reviewing the final divorce decree. Every clause was clear, every number accurate, every consequence accounted for. He picked up the pen, the same one he used to sign contracts for Cole Electrical, and added his signature to the last page. "Anything else?" he asked, sliding the document across the desk. His attorney shook her head. "That's it. You're done." Raymond stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out into the ordinary daylight of a Wednesday afternoon. 14 months had reshaped more than just Raymond's daily routine. Sitting at his new kitchen table, he took time to appreciate his breakfast: real eggs, toast, fresh coffee in a proper mug. The morning sun streamed through windows that faced east, exactly as he'd wanted. The house was smaller than the old one, but it was his in every way that mattered. He glanced at his watch. 7:15 a.m. No need to rush. Cole Electrical ran like clockwork these days, with 3 full crews handling jobs across the city. Marcus, the project manager he'd hired 8 months ago, had already texted the day's schedule. Bringing Marcus on board had been one of those decisions that made Raymond wonder why he'd waited so long. But he knew why. All that money that should have gone into growing the business had been flowing into Cassandra's elaborate deception instead. The kitchen phone rang, the landline he'd kept mostly for business calls. It was Priya, already at the office. "Morning, partner," she said, the title still carrying a hint of pleased formality. Making her a full business operations partner had been his first major decision after the divorce. She'd earned it long before the audit that changed everything, but now it was official, complete with new business cards and letterhead. "Those permit applications came through," she continued. "We're clear to start the Wilson project Monday." "Good," Raymond said, finishing his coffee. "I'll have Marcus coordinate with the supply house." After hanging up, Raymond walked through his living room to the garage door. He flicked on the lights, revealing his ongoing project. The 3-car garage was slowly transforming into the workshop he'd always wanted. Proper ventilation, custom workbenches, space for every tool he'd collected over the years. The previous weekend, Uncle Darnell had helped him install the industrial-grade electrical panel that would power his equipment. Those Sunday visits with Darnell had become sacred routine. They'd work on the workshop, share a meal, talk about everything or nothing. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just worked side by side in comfortable silence. It was healing in its own quiet way. Raymond ran his hand along the newly installed workbench. Soon, he'd have space to take on the restoration projects he'd always wanted to try. Antique lamps, vintage electrical equipment, maybe even teach some apprentice classes. No rush, though. He was learning to let things develop at their own pace. Speaking of pace, his thoughts drifted to Sarah. They'd met through a mutual client 3 months ago. She was a commercial real estate agent who'd called him for a consultation. Their first coffee meeting had stretched into 2 hours of easy conversation. Since then, they'd been getting to know each other slowly, deliberately. No pressure, no performances, no need to be anything other than who they were. Last weekend, she'd asked about his divorce. He'd told her the truth, simply and without bitterness. She'd listened, really listened, and then said something that stuck with him. "Your capacity for dedication isn't a flaw. It just needed better direction." She was right. The problem had never been his willingness to sacrifice. It was that he'd given that dedication to someone who saw it as weakness rather than strength. Raymond grabbed his work jacket and headed out. The morning was bright, the air crisp with early fall. His new truck, practical, reliable, exactly what he needed, started with a quiet purr. The old one had too many memories embedded in its seats. The job site was humming when he arrived. His crews moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role. Raymond walked the site, checking connections, verifying work quality. This was what he'd built, what he'd always been building, not just electrical systems, but a reputation for solid work and straight dealing. Mid-afternoon, his foreman Mike jogged up, holding a pink message slip. "Call came in for you at the office," Mike said, extending the paper. "Woman wouldn't leave a number, just her name." Raymond took the slip, read the name once. Cassandra Whitfield. She'd gone back to her maiden name. The thought carried no weight anymore. Mike waited, clearly uncertain about the sudden stillness in his boss's face. Raymond looked at the paper one more time, then handed it back. "Mark it no callback." Mike nodded, no questions asked, and headed back to his crew. Raymond pulled out his inspection checklist and continued his walkthrough. The wiring was clean, every connection secure, every run properly supported. The work was solid, like everything he put his name on. He made a few notes about the final inspections needed, signed off on the day's progress, and moved on to the next task at hand. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.